I wanted to introduce myself and thank you for attending the Missouri Tree Farm Conference. My name is Laurie Wilson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Forest and Woodland Association of Missouri, and also the Administrator for the Missouri Tree Farm System. The Forest and Woodland Association of Missouri was founded in 2011 as a public advocacy voice for privately owned woodlands to promote healthy, productive, and sustainable forests and trees. Our membership includes woodland owners and non-owners, tree farmers, conservationists, educators, basically anyone that has an interest in the health of Missouri's forests and trees and wants to assure that those lands receive the care and support that they need. The Forest and Woodland Association is also the administrator of the Missouri Tree Farm System. The Tree Farm System is a program for woodland owners who are committed to managing their forested property for recreation, water, wildlife, and of course wood. Membership is open to woodland owners who have 10 or more acres and who are willing to develop and carry out a management plan to meet those objectives on their land. Again, thank you all for being here. I would like to turn things over at this time to our chairman of our Missouri Tree Farm System, Rick
Good
Merritt.
evening. Welcome to the Missouri Tree Farm webinar. My name is Rick Merritt. I'm the current chairperson of the Missouri Tree Farm Committee. This evening, we want to share our recognition of the 2019 Missouri Tree Farm of the Year Award winners, Art and Janice Suchland of Hannibal, Missouri. Please let me present a brief background of the events leading up to our webinar this evening. Our committee is currently made up of 22 members, representing tree farm landowners, MDC, Missouri Department of Conservation, I should say, foresters, Natural Resources Conservation Service, Missouri Farm Bureau, Missouri Forest Products Association, the University of Missouri Extension, the Forest and Woodland Association of Missouri, which is Lori, she is our administrator, the U.S. Forest Service, and the National Wild Turkey Federation. The Missouri Tree Farm System is a nonprofit conservation organization and a state affiliate of the national organization called the American Tree Farm System. The American Tree Farm System recently celebrated their 75th anniversary. ATFS is the oldest and largest sustainable woodland system in the United States and recognized internationally. They represent 74,000 tree farm members owning approximately 19 million acres of certified woodlands and forests in the United States. Our Missouri Tree Farm System currently represents 396 certified tree farm landowners, managing approximately 100,000 acres of private woodlands in Missouri. We're funded through revenue earned from the American Tree Farm System for required certified inspections that are provided by our MDC resource foresters and consulting foresters. Plus, we get direct funding from the Missouri Department of Conservation. One of the yearly functions of our state committee is to nominate and then choose a Missouri tree farm landowner who best represents the energy and management practices of the Missouri Tree Farm organization. Once that landowner has been chosen by the committee, precedent has been to host a conference sometime in late spring on the landowner's property for the public and other tree farm owners or members to attend. Unfortunately, as we all are aware, the COVID-19 epidemic, which hit us early in the spring, made us postpone the event, and eventually we chose to do the conference virtually at a later date and then rather than on the site of the landowner. So here we are. And without further ado, I will turn this part of the program over to our host, Lori, who will key up the video of the Suchland property taken several months ago when some committee members met on site for the filming and a tour of the property. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rick Merritt. I'm the chairperson of the Missouri Tree Farm Committee.
And today it gives me a great pleasure to introduce the 2019 Missouri Tree Farm of the Year Award to Art and Jana Suchland. Lori, why don't you join us here? And Lori has got the actual plaque, so we'll make it official, Art and Jana.
All right, thank you.
And Lori's the executive director of FWAM, and she does our work for the Tree Farm Committee as well. From there, I'll turn it over to Art and Jana if you want to start out our presentation today on what we hope to share with our viewers.
Well, thank you very much, Rick, and I appreciate the honor. And my wife is here with me, my wife Jana. We purchased this property in 1987. At the time I was selling Christmas trees in Hannibal, and we were growing some trees on other people's land, and we were looking for ground where I could raise some Christmas trees. And for a few years we grew Christmas trees and sold Christmas trees from this farm. There currently aren't any Christmas trees left. But being a forester, I was always very interested in the timber part of it. But there is cropland on this, this property, about 30 acres, and 70 acres of timber in the tree farm. I've done some management through the years, but I've been particularly interested in wildlife, and not just deer and turkeys, but also birds, and maintaining habitat for other species like quail, and also concerned about butterflies. And when I mow, I don't mow off the milkweed and things like that, to maintain this as a diverse property for all species of wildlife. We've had a lot of good times here on the farm. We have a son who wants to inherit the property.
Perfect.
And we have 2 grandsons.
Wow.
And so we're looking forward to continuing to try and improve the farm, not only for forestry, but for all species of wildlife, and as a place for recreation. We ride ATVs here on the property. Cool. I think we'll be able to show some folks that are watching some interesting things here on the property. We have lots of wild plum growing. We have lots of hazelnut, and a lot of different types of timber stands. The property before we owned it was grazed and logged, and also they were still doing some land clearing. So there were a couple of old field areas that were let to grow back up to timber. At this time, maybe I can quit talking and we can turn this over to other parts of the program. Land on the farm is dominated by big trees. I guess you would say they're mature even though they're not huge. This white oak is going to be about 20 inches in diameter. The problem is that the trees are getting bigger and many of them are starting to die. The understory, that which you can see around that I've gone ahead and cut, there was no oak reproduction. And so I know that I need to get rid of the understory, the multiflora, the ironwood, the other, even some hickory, because hickories will grow in the shade. But then, how much of the overstory do I need to remove in order to get oak reproduction started? I've done, research and done some reading, and there's theories that maybe 30% of the overstory ought to be removed, but you would have to remove the dominant trees in order to get sunlight down here to the ground where we could hopefully get some oak reproduction. I'll have to admit that it is a lot of work to come through here and cut the hundreds of small trees. Every one that I've cut, I treat with a herbicide. In this case, I'm using Tordon, RTU, to kill so that they don't sprout. But I would like to get oak reproduction going here, so I'm going to continue to work in this about 6-acre stand to get all the understory that's currently here removed, and then hopefully this next winter, after we are not concerned about cutting bat trees, that we would go ahead and do a timber sale in here. The big question in my mind is, how much of the overstory do I want to remove in order to get sunlight here to the ground so that we can hopefully get oak reproduction? I prune walnut trees wherever they grow. I have not really planted any walnuts at all. So this tree is a volunteer, and I've done some pruning on it over the past several years. The cleared length of the tree now is only about 6 foot, 7 foot at the most, which really doesn't give you a very long log. To help increase the value of the tree, you need to have 8 or 10 foot of clear log. And so some additional limbs need pruned off. Normally you would like to prune off a limb before it increases in diameter to 2 inches. So this winter, this limb here needs pruned off, and at that time I'll probably go ahead and prune these limbs off also. These limbs are at 7 foot now. They're always going to be at 7 foot. The knot that's going to be left will be at 7 foot in the log. The limbs don't grow up. The limbs grow out, and the tree grows up from the top. And so this tree needs some additional pruning, and that's one thing about walnuts, is they need pruned in order to have a good value when it comes time to harvest. I'm standing here with my back to Hippo Branch Creek, which runs through the property for over 1/4 mile. I've been trying to maintain the riparian corridor that goes along Hippo Creek. I'm looking out at a 20-acre soybean field. The creek got up a great deal this summer, and actually eroded the stream bank considerably, which is quite a problem. A few years ago, recognizing that this actual portion of my creek bank was pretty narrow, I planted a row of trees along here, and actually a lot of bur oak, which did quite well. Even you might think, well, bur oak's not a creek bottom species, but I'm about 6 or 8 foot above the bottom of the creek, so hardwood trees like oaks grow quite well here. So I planted this row of trees, and they were doing quite well until the beavers found them. And this year ago, the beavers came in and cut off a lot of the bur oaks. Maybe not the best beaver food, but they must have liked them because they ate several of them. Fortunately, at least that they're sprouting and coming back, and there'll be some bur oaks here that I can work out of this, as long as the creek doesn't continue to erode this way at too rapid of a rate. Eventually I may need to go ahead and, for a ways here, plant another row of trees closer to the soybean field, give up a little cropland, and be able to maintain at least a 40-50 foot riparian corridor here, whereas further down and back to my right, the corridor is much wider.
Hey, this is one of my favorite places where we have all the Laertius, the blazing star, and the rattlesnake master. And this wasn't here when we first came, and the seed for this came from a friend of mine who's into prairie wildflowers, and we went to their farm. They live over by Paris, and picked the seed and brought it over, and in the last 3 years is what it's taken, and it's spread this much. It started just down here on this end, and it spread the whole field here, and the rattlesnake master's really taken over, and we really enjoy the butterflies that come to it, and we enjoy all the wildflowers that have reappeared that we didn't see before, since there's not been any cattle on the place for a long time. So we enjoy the ironweed and the different kinds of milkweeds and all the things that come back. So we really enjoy this part, and butterflies especially, all kinds that come.
This particular field is planted mostly to the clover that you can see growing. I haven't gotten it all mowed off, but Queen Anne's lace loves this field, and every year, in order to have the best crop of clover, I mow at least part of the wildflowers off. In this case, it's mostly Queen Anne's lace, but there are some yellow composites in here also. I like clover real well for food plot, and then also if there's no wheat on the farm, then I plant some wheat each fall because I like winter wheat as a food plot also. I'm here in one of the better woodland sites on the farm. I'm here with David Vance, the resource forester from the Hannibal office of the Department of Conservation. When he came to me last year about renewing and staying in the tree farm program, I needed to have a new management plan. After I had agreed to continue on, he said, well, there was a program where the Department of Conservation could help pay for a new management plan, which I have with me here today, which was done in cooperation with the Department of Conservation. So I'm standing here looking into a area that when I purchased the property was basically cleared. The previous landowner was still trying to make more pasture. Well, I just let the area grow, and interestingly enough, it grew back to a pretty good stand of oak regeneration, which a good bit of it I thinned, did TSI in, but you can see right here that at this particular spot, there are still too many trees. They're white oak, looks like a post oak back here, and then over here to my right are several northern red oaks. So this forest has taken off on its own and is doing just fine. But I would like to thank the Department of Conservation for the management plan, and I'm trying to implement it, and David, appreciate it very much. The farm doesn't just consist of new growth by any means. Earlier you had seen some of the big trees in another stand on the farm, but one of the better stands on this property has got considerable amount of good white oak in it. The land that was cleared is growing back, but land that they had not cleared before I bought the farm or even harvested is currently still growing some big trees. There's always a question. I really like to grow big trees rather than cutting something that's 16 or 18 inches in diameter at chest high. I'd rather grow them to 20 or 22 or even 24 inches in diameter. Problem with that is in some cases that trees just don't last that long, particularly black oaks and some of the northern red oaks. And that's particularly true is up here on the ridge. And so most of the trees that are right here are white oaks, and which is a good species, good for wildlife. The smaller trees that are started growing when I bought this property in '87, they're not probably producing many acorns yet, but hopefully some of these bigger white oaks are producing enough acorns to really provide food for turkeys and deer and squirrels and other species. So I have not harvested anything here in this part of the property. The only harvest I've actually done on my tree farm is we had a storm come through in 2015 and damaged a considerable number of walnuts down along the creek on other parts of the farm. And so I did have a salvage sale of some of those walnuts, and at the same time I cut some big trees which were growing along the edges of the crop fields. I do have the management plan with me here today, and it is a big help to have a plan and to have the farm divided up into various timber stands, which makes it that you can work in a given area, try to follow the plan, and follow through then on what's suggested to be done. How we'll actually get white oak regeneration here when we harvest is another question, because when I look around here right now, I see that in this woods with big trees, most of the understory is not really white oak or even northern red oak. It's hickory and ash and other species that are not really wanting to grow here. So it will be a challenge in the years ahead to actually continue to have woodland that is dominated by white oak and the black oak and red oak species. There are a couple of points I would like to make in regards to my experience of 34 years of being a forester. One of them is that when I would go to the woods with a landowner, and they would think that if you cut a big tree, there might be a tree nearby of the same species, and that it would be something that would grow for the future. But quite often that smaller tree was the same age, or would be the same age if you bored it with an increment bore as the bigger tree. And so many times that wasn't a feasible way to manage the woodland. If you were going to cut the good tree, you needed to go ahead and hopefully be able to sell that smaller one in order to open the woods up a little more, maybe get enough room to have reproduction and get some new trees growing. Another point on that is for the landowner and the logger. When a logger comes in without the timber being marked by a forester, they would maybe want to cut it on what they would say would be a diameter limit sale. In other words, they would only cut trees of a certain diameter or larger. But two things there. One is, where's the diameter measured? And the other point being that if the logger came in and cut that tree that was bigger, then he too was leaving that inferior tree to grow for the future, which wouldn't really be the way to manage your woodland.
So I work a lot with landowners just like Art here. You know, a lot of times they'll call me saying, hey, I've got several acres of woods. What can I do to make it better for wildlife, trees, whatever their interests are? So I'll go out and I'll walk the property with them, talk with them, kind of find out what their ideas as far as forest management goes. And then a lot of times what we will do is we'll develop them a management plan, much like what Art received this year. Basically, think of a management plan as a roadmap. This is what your property is right now, and your goal down the road. This plan will help guide you on what you can do to manage your property to attain those goals. You know, whether your goals are wildlife, timber production, wildflowers, recreation. All those different, those are the four main components of the tree farm program. So, once you start managing those, you have the plan, you're doing good work on your property, you're an excellent candidate for a tree farm.
All right, and I want to say thanks to Art and Jana Suchland for allowing us the opportunity to go out and tour their property.